What are your plans for this visit?
We are also organizing a forum between the Croatian and Ukrainian businessmen. There are more than 100 Croatian businessmen who flew in from Zagreb with me. Second, of course, is to share with Ukraine experience of our most recent knowledge in the association and accession process to the European Union. We joined, as you know, in 2013. So the knowledge of my country, my experts, my colleagues is the most fresh knowledge, so to say. Third aspect is something which is strategically important for the integrity of Ukraine, for the territorial integrity, and that is the experience of Croatia that we had, unfortunately, in the beginning of the 90s, in the process of peaceful reintegration of, at the time, our occupied territories.
War, which is not everyone in Europe, not everyone in the world, became the call war for independence. So this question of civil war or war for independence, here in Ukraine you have the same thing. Mm-hmm. What can you tell of from the Croatia experience? How should Ukraine proceed?
Ukraine has been a victim of aggression. In terms of the defining of the conflict, in my mind, there is no any dilemma. We know exactly who is a victim and who is an aggressor at this situation. And I will always try to articulate clearly that the reintegration of your territories is a priority and a legal and moral obligation of the international community. I formed at the last session of the Croatian government a special working group of my colleagues who were involved in this exercise in the middle of the 90s, who know exactly how to undertake the catalogue of measures which would rebuild confidence, of course, first of all, ensure security, rebuild trust, try to do the maximum regarding the elements that go into decentralization aspect, inclusion in the society, transfer of social funds, inclusion of hryvnia on the occupied territories, so that the normalization of life is created in a way that would permit also the organization of local elections and thus full reintegration of territory. But in my view, security is the precondition that Ukraine should clearly insist with its international partners.
And what is your biggest concern about Ukraine? Some dangers, perhaps some steps which Ukrainian establishment does, and you're looking at it, and from your Croatian point of view, what is the biggest concern?
Well, Ukraine is still, I would say, in the transition process. I think all of the countries, even us who entered the EU and NATO a couple of years ago, nevertheless, this transition from the former times of the socialist system is somehow present, and it takes generations to change the atmosphere, to change the mentality. In my view, strong state, strong institutions, first of all, fully committed to the rule of law and fight against corruption should be a common consensus for the overall Ukrainian political scene, and keeping the European course. In my view, in this delicate international context that we are all facing now, the European course should be the priority for Ukraine and Ukrainian political actors, and this is where the support of the EU side should come. Bear in mind that Ukraine has received as much institutional, financial and economic aid that no one else in Central and Eastern Europe has enjoyed in the past. But as I said, the competition of various crises, the difficulties in the ratification process, the internal political, sometimes instability here, are making this process more delicate than it was supposed to be after the elections. I think Ukraine needs stability, and stability should bring progress on the EU path.
When will Ukraine have with a free regime with Europe?
Despite the difficulties, I think now the European Union should completely and fully, vigorously address the issue of the visa liberalization, because I think this is something we owe to the Ukrainian citizens. This is the most tangible aspect of how Europe becomes closer to the Ukrainian citizens. We know that Ukraine managed to be strong enough to care for 1.5 million internally displaced persons without overflow of these refugees into the territory of the European Union. I think this is something we should respect.